This is not an apologetic work at all. And by apologetic, I mean defending the right of queer people to exist.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. This week's episode is going to be a very special episode. Missy and I sat down with the Reverend Cawthon-Freels, who is the director of our Faithful Pride Initiative here at Good Faith Media. Callie's got a new book out titled A Queer Gospel, Jesus' Life Through Rainbow Eyes. We wanted to have this incredible conversation with her and share it with you. It is a fabulous episode that you are not going to want to miss. So stay tuned.
I'm Callie Cawthon-Freels, Director of the Faithful Pride Initiative at Good Faith Media. Through Faithful Pride, we seek to elevate the work of queer people of faith who are changing the world in beautiful ways. LGBTQ+ people are made in the image of God, just as they are, and as a queer person myself, I know that embracing my queerness has made me a better and more whole person of faith. Perhaps the same is true for you too. To learn more about the work of the Faithful Pride Initiative, check out goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us, one of Good Faith Media's very own, the Reverend Callie Cawthon-Freels. She is a bivocational pastor and writer based in Williamsburg, Virginia. She currently serves as the director of the Faithful Pride Initiative at Good Faith Media and the associate pastor at Williamsburg Baptist Church. She is the author of Reclamation, a queer pastor's guide to finding spiritual growth in the passages used to harm us. And her newest book, A Queer Gospel, Jesus' Life Through Rainbow Eyes, is available wherever you purchase your reading materials. Callie, goes without saying, welcome back to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it's always a pleasure to get to chat with you all.
So, Callie, in case the audience didn't glean from Mitch's introduction, I just want to say this for the record. You are absolutely one of our favorite people on the planet.
Absolutely.
Your just wisdom and your care and just your intentionality is infectious. And that absolutely came through in this book. We both read it cover to cover and had so much fun just talking about it amongst ourselves. So now we get to talk about it with you, which is super fun. So congratulations, first of all. But I wanted to say one of the aspects that I really loved about the book is that it's unique, at least to me, not probably in scholarly circles, but to me, in that the purpose isn't to really address passages or argue misinterpretations of Bible verses that are used to, against queer people. It's got a completely different purpose. So I want you to tell us what the purpose of this book is. And then once you do that, I want to tell you why this book took me back to math class.
Excellent.
As someone who loves math, I look forward to hearing that.
I figured you might.
No, I think for me, the book was really about who is allowed to see themselves in Jesus. And in so much of the dialogue we're seeing today, like unfortunately, the capital C global church has caused so much harm against queer lives. And that I think has really challenged a lot of queer people's abilities to see divinity within themselves, to see how they are made in the image of God. So the purpose of the book was really one, to help LGBTQ plus people see themselves in the story of Jesus, and then two, in turn, be able to see Jesus in themselves. So for that reason, it wasn't so much for me about like arguing interpretations and whatnot. I mean, I absolutely engage in like some Bible scholarship, like, digging into different commentaries and interpretations of the Gospels more than anything else. But this is not an apologetic work at all. And by apologetic, I mean defending the right of queer people to exist. That just didn't feel generative to me, to just engage in like an argument. And so what I really hope for this book is that it is a meaningful contribution to a small but growing body of work that seeks to make queer theology accessible to people who aren't in the academy. So like the average person in the pew, and how it can really add some context or explanation to their own spiritual journeys. I think there are a lot of really beautiful things in queer theology that don't get discussed, not because it's obscure, not because it's just completely out of left field, though there are some things in queer theology that fall into that category. Will absolutely own that.
Right.
But just because it's not presented in a way that's practical for the average believer. So that was a really big goal of the book as well for me. How do we make these things more accessible to folks?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, now I get to tell you how it took me back to math class.
I'm so excited about
I know.
this.
Mitch had to suffer through this when I started reading the book in the car. We were driving on a road trip and I went into this and he just quickly got tired head. But here's the thing. So in college, I'm gonna toot my own horn here for a moment. When I was in college back a long time ago, they used to at orientation give you placement tests to tell you what math class to join. I tested out of so many levels of math.
Wow.
This is not
The
really a
humble
You're on
brag.
a
there.
high horse right
Yeah,
now.
no, this is not really a brag. Basically, I tested out of all of the like freshman year, whatever math classes. And so I took the next level math. And then after that, I needed like 2 or 3 more hours math, but there really wasn't anything that applied to me. So
I know it's hard to believe that's not why I married her.
What made you take Missy?
In spite of, right? Okay, so I signed up for this math class that's specifically for like, education majors, thinking, okay, this will be pretty easy and all this. And it wasn't hard. But here's the thing. Something we don't think about in our everyday life now is that we work on a base 10 math system. And what that means is you go digits 1 through 9. Once you get to 9, you have to add a digit and you start over with the 1 and the 0. We don't even think about this. It's just the water we swim in.
Yeah.
So what this class did is they're like, we're taking all of those blocks away. We're giving you new blocks. We are working in base 2, base 3, base 4. And so in that example, like a base 2, for example, you go 1, 2, and then you have to start over again with 2 digits like 1, 0 because you've, finished your base. Okay, so that's what we had to do. It was really fun. It was like getting a new set of blocks to play with. And what your book did was it reminded me of that. You took us back and showed us a new set of blocks to play with. And you made us question, why did we only have the first set of blocks in the first place? And so I love that. I think that, at least in my purview, I think speakers, preachers have done a good job of reading the Bible and showing us how it looks through a person who's indigenous or a person who is of African descent and things like this. But the queer lens is something that is very new to me. And I loved that in the book, you talked about a similar parallel in your French class. So before we go any further, would you like to tell the story?
Absolutely. So my French teacher, I didn't name her in the book, but we all called her Madame Kelly. And she was my high school French teacher. And she was just so passionate about teaching, and her goal was really to connect with students and get them excited about learning. And she did this in wildly creative ways. And again, I want to remind folks that these are high school students, like
Right.
older teenagers, like between 15 and 18, we're talking about here. And so she would have us doing some of the most ridiculous things in class. Like I can still conjugate the verb to be in French because she taught us to do it using patty cake and would made us do the hand motions in class. Like she would have us literally standing on our chairs while we were like touching different body parts and doing, head, shoulders, knees, and toes in French. Like you walk by and you're like, what in the world is going on in that room? But everyone who knew Madame Kelly just knew that that's how her classes were. And as a result, we all got to cut loose a little bit. Like there were no cool kids in her class. Like nobody got out of having to play patty cake, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so everybody just kind of embraced the silliness of it. And it really made the class that much more memorable and impactful. I think if you ask any alumni from my high school who their favorite teacher was, I imagine at least 1 in 3 would say Madame Kelly.
See,
absolutely.
And I love that because she gave you a new set of blocks to play with. Like you had to go back to the beginning and relearn those basic fundamental skills with a different set of rules and a different set of words. And so that's where it kind of spoke to me. Like I'd already told Mitch about my experience. And then you said that. I was like, oh, I was so excited about the connection. So Here we're going to start with our new set of blocks, and I want to start with a couple of things we need to set as a foundation. And the first is let's kind of explore the term queer. And
Mhm.
then the second term I want to explore is sanctified imagination, and I want to talk about why it's important and why we've only allowed one set of people to have and to teach sanctified imagination. So let's start with
Yeah.
the term queer.
Absolutely. So queer, I know, can be a really loaded term for some people, and rightfully so. We have members in my congregation who are older, who, had friends die in the AIDS crisis and remember what it was like to have people sling that word like a slur at them. And so for some folks, it reminds them of a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, and certainly don't want to overlook that. Some folks have decided to reclaim this word queer as a way to find their own agency and to say that word's not going to have that power over me in this way. And I think in recent years, what we're also seeing is people use the word queer as kind of an umbrella term for the LGBTQ plus community, because they recognize that even the shortened version of the acronym is kind of cumbersome to say. So some people use it as an umbrella term to talk about the community as a whole. Some people use it as an umbrella term for themselves to describe both their sexual orientation and their gender identity. So that way they don't have to get into a really specific, nuanced conversation with people. And frankly, that's why I use queer myself. Part of it is that reclamation bit. I love the subversiveness of that.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is because I don't want to have like a 15-minute long conversation when someone asks me, well, how do you identify? And I'm like, how much time do you have? Queer just kind of covers it.
Mhm.
And then there's also something to be said for just in the academy, the disciplines of queer theory and queer theology, like that's just what they're known as.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a negative descriptor. It's just neutrally describing this is what it's called when we study this thing. So those are kind of, just in a quick nutshell, some of the baggage that comes with the word queer and why some people use it today and why some people don't. And there's still a lot of conversation out there about whether or not it is a good label for people to use. And I think for me, it's not so much about policing, you have to use this word no matter what trauma it reminds you of, or nobody should use this word. It's about, learning from one another, listening, understanding why it's meaningful to some and why it's not, and then just kind of respecting how they want the word used or not.
For the purposes of this book, I think the umbrella term is a great way to put it, and that's kind of how you move forward within the book. But let's move on to sanctified imagination, because
Mhm.
again, this was another block you gave me that kind of showed me that there has been for much of history one person that's been allowed to have it, one person that's been allowed to teach it, and we have not questioned it. And so,
Mhm.
tell us what that is and how you utilize it.
Yeah, so sanctified imagination, that is not a term I coined. It's a term that I've heard several colleagues use, and I know that they gleaned it from somewhere else. So it's for
Right.
me, it's like this game of telephone. I'm not entirely sure who coined the phrase.
It's a
I
good
just want
one
to
though.
own that it's not mine.
Mhm.
But yeah, so for me, sanctified imagination is just the reality that God still speaks to us through our conscious, through our subconscious. And so it's a way that we can just imagine a better world, right? And so it's like, how do we imagine the kingdom of God coming on earth as it is in heaven? Like, how do we make that possible if we can't dream it?
Mhm.
So for me, sanctified imagination is what is it like to imagine or picture a world wherein everyone is loved as who they are. The way in which people are wired by God is respected and cherished. So for me, coming at it particularly from a queer lens, that's a lot of what sanctified imagination means to me. I think more broadly, it is about, imagining these worlds that are not currently our reality. I think it was the science fiction writer Octavia Butler said something akin to all social justice work is fiction writing, because we are writing a world that doesn't yet exist.
Mm.
So for me, like sanctified imagination follows a very similar kind of train of thought. The key difference being that I would like to believe that it's divinely inspired. So that's, I think, the biggest caveat between those two different things.
Thank you. I really appreciated that terminology, and that kind of flipped a script on me and it helped open my mind to see the scripture through your lens and the way that you were seeing it. All right, now I think it's time to let Mitch have a turn to talk.
Well, I was wondering if it was my turn.
He's been so patient.
I have been so patient. But Callie, I do want to thank you personally for giving her that term, sanctified imagination, because for 30 years she's been practicing irreverent imagination.
That's not untrue. Yes.
So
Don't we all?
We need to sanctify her just a bit. So thanks for that. Well, let's move on to one of these blocks. I mean, again, the book is outstanding. You walk us through this parallel between Jesus' life and the queer gospel, and I just absolutely loved every moment of it. So let's start with the beginning and the birth of Jesus. I love the way you take the birth narrative and you talk about the persecution of the baby Jesus, but also the fact that Jesus found allies, and so I just thought that was brilliant. So set the stage for us about how Jesus' life and his beginning started this idea for you about the queer gospel and making these connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we look at the circumstances that preceded Jesus's birth,
Mhm.
like all of that was pretty queer in the sense of the word that it's a little weird and pretty subversive. I mean, you have these divine beings appear to Mary and Joseph at different times and tell them, hey, your kid is going to be the Son of God. And we don't see a traditional kind of conception and all of that kind of stuff. Like nothing about how making a baby is supposed to work. Note the air quotes.
Mhm.
None of that happens, at least is what we're told. And so you have these moments where the parents, Mary and Joseph, I think, I can't imagine being in that position and not having a lot of questions and a lot of doubts. In the same way that many parents, when they start to realize that their kid is different, maybe a little queer or
Yeah.
gay or trans or something, they start seeing these signs. And those parents are given a choice, kind of in the way that Mary and Joseph were. And, we see Mary say, yeah, this is what we're doing,
Mhm.
and go with it and go and find help from a trusted relative who's been in a kind of a similar situation. We see Mary kind of more readily accept this as their reality now. And you see Joseph really kind of question it. And in the Matthean account, we see Joseph, try to make plans to divorce Mary quietly and say, I want nothing to do with this, which unfortunately, when we're talking about the experiences of queer kids today, is a really common phenomenon. I cited a study in this chapter I forget what year it was and how many people were involved. But they asked men who had what we might call traditionally male characteristics,
Mhm.
or traditional understandings of masculinity, even, um, how they would respond if one of their kids came out to them as gay or queer. And a disproportionate amount of those men said that they would cut off contact with their kid.
Mm.
And so I think it's important for us to see like these moments reflected in scripture as well. I mean, obviously we don't want to eisegete the thing and read our own stories into it, but I do think scripture can act as a mirror here. Like, was there a situation where the kid they were about to have went against social norms? Yes. That's
Right.
similar to what we're seeing here.
Mhm.
Did the parents have a choice in how they responded? Also, yes. And we see that today in our own lives. And so thankfully, Joseph, I don't know if it's accurate to say he had a come to Jesus moment because Jesus wasn't there yet. Um, but Joseph has this moment, right, where he realizes that he needs to be along for this ride too,
Mhm.
and comes to this moment of accepting Jesus as his son. Um, and so I think even just from that little snippet, we get the sense that Jesus' story is going to be a unique one. It's going to be a challenging one. And it's going to be a queer one, for lack of a better word here. But to your point about persecution and finding allies, we see this, I think, in the story of the Magi, right? They
Yeah.
come 2 years after Jesus is born. They want to show Jesus honor and reverence and respect. And Herod wants to find Jesus so, he can end Jesus because he believes this prophecy about a kid born from the Israelites rising up to usurp him.
Mhm.
right? And so Herod is like, I need to figure out who this kid is so I can get rid of him. Um, and the Magi see through Herod pretty quickly because they meet Herod. Herod says, "Hey, if you find this Christ child, let me know because I also would like to go, pay my respects." Thankfully, they see through that. They go, they meet Jesus. They see how unique and special and precious he is. Angels appear to them in a dream and tell them not to go back to Herod. And so they go back home. They never tell Herod where Jesus is. And to me, like that's allyship, right? Like, what are the steps that you can take or the actions you avoid
Yeah.
in order to protect people who are at risk? And being a child, Jesus was absolutely at risk. And then his parents really stood up to be allies for him as well. Like once they realized all this was going on, I think angels appeared to them as well and told them to leave and flee to Egypt.
Mhm.
So they did before Herod ordered the massacre of all of the kids under the age of 2 in his little district there. Um, and to me, that rings similar to just parents really advocating for their kids in states that are writing these ridiculous transphobic laws attacking our trans and non-binary youth.
Yeah.
And so just seeing like what are the links that parents would go through to ensure that their kids are safe and recognizing that not all families have the financial support they need to get out of those hostile states is, I think, a really sobering thing. But I think, when we look at the story of Jesus, we see like these examples of what does it look like to really rally around and support our kids who are different or
Mhm.
perceived different by broader society. Um, and that's a really powerful thing that we need to hear right now.
Yeah.
So,
I think just in the way you frame that about Mary and Joseph, I mean, again, it opened a new little light for me of identifying with their very normal parental emotions, like you said, of what am I going to do? Am I going to be a part of this? That was really beautiful. And I'm so glad you told the wise men story because I was going to prompt you to tell us how the wise men were like a youth group. And I love I love the way that you interject humor into this book. I absolutely heard your voice as I read it, and that was one of the funniest things because I totally could picture this
Yeah.
image. And so I don't want to give it all away. You guys got to go read the book because it's really funny. If you have ever been in a youth
Yeah.
group, you will absolutely
All
see
you need
this
to know
moment.
is Herod's the youth
Youth
pastor,
minister, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
Magi are the students.
So it was really fun. Thank you again for that. So throughout this book, you often mention coming out and the number of times Jesus had to do just that. Then you parallel that with, queer individuals coming out. So talk about how those two things relate.
yeah, like coming out is not a one-time event, right? Like I
Mhm.
know every October, the community celebrates Coming Out Day,
Mhm.
and people often share coming out stories, but it's not like, once you're out, you're out. There are often times where you have to come out in new contexts every day. You apply for a job, you get the job, somebody asks you about your family.
Mhm.
you know, that's a moment where you have a choice. Am I going to come out to this new colleague? Have I assessed whether or not it's safe enough to be out at work? And so like you just have these moments throughout your life where it's a process. And like for some, and not even just for how you understand yourself now, some queer people, they realize that they're not straight when they're younger. They get a little older, they realize that maybe they're not cisgender either. And so they come out again in regards to their gender identity. And so there are just so many different ways that we continually come out.
Mhm.
And I think we see that in the life of Jesus as well, where, I mentioned a couple of coming out moments, like when he gets baptized at the Jordan River as a moment of really claiming his ministry after coming out of the desert. When he takes 3 of his closest disciples up on the mountain and undergoes the transfiguration,
Mhm.
that's a coming out moment that he shares with just a handful of people he really cares about. Um, you know, and every time he does a miracle, I would say that's a coming out moment as well to the select group of folks. And so that's just coming out is a way of life in the queer community, just because we get put in these different contexts all the
Yeah.
time.
And
I love what you wrote. Coming out does not make you LGBTQ plus. Coming
Mhm.
out is simply a public declaration of an inward truth. And I think that is so important. And as you mentioned a
Mhm.
moment ago, there are individuals who, there's not a safe place for them to come out yet. And that is okay. They need to come out on
Mhm.
their own terms. And so
Mhm.
I think, that was just brilliantly said. And, it's one of the things that I think we have talked about and recognized throughout the years is that, you know, coming out doesn't make you queer.
Right.
You're a queer person long before that. You've known that inwardly, but
Mhm.
coming out is this public declaration when you're ready to do so. And I just thought that was a,
Mhm.
a really brilliant point that you made.
And I loved how you paralleled it with the times that Jesus had to come out, and you talked about the very real circumstances which he found himself in. And you kind of talked about, what if it wasn't the way we've always seen it, but what if it was like you just said, this wasn't a safe place and he knew that. And so then all
Mhm.
of a sudden it humanizes the whole situation for us, because then we're like, okay, I get that, and not some
Yeah.
over spiritualized thing that we've been told all of our lives. So that would just, it
Yeah.
was such a great way to understand the very human experience in his life.
Right, like those moments where he heals people and then he says, "Don't tell anyone who healed you."
Right, right.
Like so many of the scholars are like, "Oh, that's Jesus just trying to be humble." And I was like, "Well, if that's the case, then why does it say a couple of verses later he knew that the authorities were looking for him?"
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's just like there's this sense that there is some kind of recognition that it may not be a safe place to be out, so to speak.
Right.
But also too, like to what you said, Mitch, about people are queer whether they come out or not. I think, we see that beautifully modeled in Jesus. Like
Mhm.
Jesus was Christ, whether he came out or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just that declaration of an inward truth that's powerful. And it's a shame that we have so many different societies around the world and in places here in the US as well, where it's just not safe to be out everywhere.
Yeah.
Like that, I think, is a broader systemic sin of creating a lack of hospitality in our country, of just instilling fear and harm. And that's something that we have to really reckon with. Why are we creating these cultures where it's not safe for people to just be themselves? You
Mm-hmm.
know, but that's a whole other rabbit trail we could go down.
I'm here for it.
Another part of the book that I really appreciated, Callie, was that you get really personal in this book and you share your own story, especially when you're talking about chosen family. And so
Mhm.
you write about Jesus' chosen family, you write about your own experience, and then you also write about the larger queer community. So talk to us a little bit about the significance of that term chosen community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say too, like I did get a little bit more personal in this book for three main reasons. One was because, my whole argument is about queer people have a unique perspective and window into Jesus' life if we're willing to listen to their experiences, which is a personal thing. And I didn't feel like I could fairly make that argument if I
Mhm.
wasn't going to share how it was true for me. It didn't feel fair. But also because just of some stigma around sharing things, particularly related to the abuse that I mentioned that I endured as a kid. An argument in conversion therapy circles, which I am very thankful I was never subjected to conversion therapy. But one of the main arguments that they just shove down people's throat is that you become gay through one of a handful of avenues, one of them being experiencing assault by a parent of the opposite gender.
Mhm.
And so because of that, there's a stigma around queer people admitting that they are survivors of abuse.
Right.
And so one of the ways that we destigmatize something is by talking about it. And so I hope that by sharing that candidly in the book, that destigmatize it and enables queer folks who have survived
Mm.
some sort of abuse to be able to go and report it and get help and find justice. Um, but those issues don't go away unless we talk about them and make a conscious effort towards doing something about it. But also too, just in sharing like why I'm estranged from my biological family, a lot of people assume it's because my family is homophobic. Because I mean, fair, a gay person tells you they're not
Sure.
connected to their biological family. That's kind of the first place their brain goes. And in some ways, it just felt like, I don't know, like lying by omission,
Mm-hmm.
maybe,
Mhm.
by allowing people to carry that assumption, especially like when my family was in my wedding, you know what I mean? And
Right.
so it's like I don't share this very core common experience among other LGBTQ plus people. So I just wanted to clear the air there, I suppose.
Yeah.
But in terms of the significance of chosen family, that's certainly not something unique to queer culture. Civilizations have been practicing chosen family for eons.
Sure.
But I think what queer people do really well is like when they find their people, like you're their people. You
Mhm.
know, it's like you've seen the memes about like whenever an extrovert adopts an introvert, like that's just how they are now. Same thing in the queer community, I would say. Like once a queer person adopts you, like you're with them, like you're their ride or die, like you are there for it. Um, I think for me, chosen family has just been about generating deep and meaningful connection. Um, that's not conditional. You know, I think Bell Hooks wrote in her book All About Love something along the lines of, you know, when we're kids, we're taught that we're not supposed to value our friendships above the relationships we build with our families, but it is often in our friendships that we experience unconditional love for the first time. But I remember the first time I read that line, I just had to put the book down.
Mhm.
And it was one of those moments where it's like when a book reads you,
Mm.
right? That's what it felt like. And that to me has been one of the best ways to describe who my chosen family is to me. I don't know what I would do without them. And so for me, like it's a deeply personal thing. If you ask other queer folks the significance of chosen family, I'm sure that you would hear similar answers.
Yeah.
But also like things unique and specific to them and their circumstance.
Yeah. Well,
So,
thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really, really moving.
that had to be a difficult thing to wrestle with because once you put it out there, it's out there and you've bared your soul and a piece of yourself. And I do appreciate it. It added so much depth to your words and to the entire book. And one thing I think it might have been in that section, you talk about the blood is thicker than water saying, and
Mm-hmm.
you teach us what that really is. And you teach us kind of the rest of the story or the rest of the verse. And so that I had never heard that before, and I so appreciated it, and it made so much sense and kind of, I don't know, just it redefined for me what that chosen family is and looks like and what that means. I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Another thing I just wanted to bring up, this is kind of fun just for me, but I love learning little nuggets from scholars who are smart. You mentioned this book is for the average person, and contrary to what I said at the beginning about, you know, being advanced in math, no. This is where I'm very definitely your average Joe Smo. This was so approachable. I understood every bit of it. But one of my favorite little nuggets from a scholar came from Amy Jill Levine, who you quote
Mm-hmm.
in the book, and I love it because a couple of years ago, she taught me that margaritas are in the Bible. Do you know this?
I do not know this.
Okay, this is like my favorite little fun fact, but the word for pearl in Greek is margaritas. And
Mm.
then you actually titled a chapter the pearl, you know, I can't remember the title of the chapter, but that pearl, and you talk about that very story in which if
Mhm.
for a fun exercise, go back and reread that passage or reread that part of the book and substitute the margaritas in there. And it's a little,
The margaritas are great price.
it made, I laughed when I was thinking about it. Anyway, so that's just a fun thing for me because I am someone who enjoys a good margarita. Anyways, so you also gave me a fun little nugget in here that I will carry with me along with my little margarita fun fact. There's a pride parade in the Bible.
Mm.
Tell us about
Yes.
it.
Yeah, so we traditionally call this Pride Parade Palm Sunday. And it's
Love that.
it's when we recognize Jesus coming into Jerusalem at the beginning of Holy Week as he's coming to Jerusalem to observe Passover.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I likened it to a pride parade for a couple of reasons. One, it's a community event that brings the community together. And two, it like celebrates a shared identity when you're living under an oppressive regime. So the folks in Jerusalem, the Jews there, they were under the control of the Roman Empire. Their emperor also engaged in a parade that they were
Mm-hmm.
expected to go to, and it was like all military honors, and he's up literally on his high horse, you know. And then on the opposite and opposing gate you have Jesus come in riding on a donkey, people waving palm branches like protest signs,
Mm-hmm.
and just it's a completely different vibe. And the unifying factor there is their identity. Right. And so for me, there's a lot of overlap between what we see there and what we see in the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, 1970, which was what we call the first Pride Parade. You have these people from disparate parts of life, people who may have known each other, may not have known each other, coming together under this unified sense of this is who we are, this is our identity, protesting against an oppressive regime that is telling them that there's something wrong with who they are. So I think for me, like, again, the parallels there are pretty clear. But it's, fun to think about, for
Well,
sure.
I'm naming it and claiming it. Margaritas and pride parades are in the Bible, and in a world in which I'm finding more and more difficulties with that, I can cling to those two things.
Yes. You can even bring the margaritas to the pride parade.
That's right.
I mean,
That's
as I
right.
do. I'm not going to lie.
Well, Callie, continuing this conversation about Holy Week, we arrive at Good Friday. And in the book, you write about betrayal and crucifixion. And so I do want to get a little bit nuanced at this point.
Yeah.
Because you write about betrayal in a general sense. And I think anybody who's at least in our audience and sphere of listeners understands how the church has betrayed the queer community.
Yeah.
But there is a conversation I really want to ask you about that's happening even within the queer community, and that is with our trans friends. There seems to be this conversation taking place about should they be allowed in community? And there has to be this sense of betrayal because you talk about, especially when you parallel, we got to remember Judas was a friend
Yeah.
of Jesus and still betrayed him. Peter was a dear friend of Jesus and still betrays him. So talk a little bit about that and, how you address that in the book.
Yeah. No, I think we're absolutely seeing that right now. Unfortunately, there's been over the past couple of years, even prominent Democrat voices publicly saying if Democrats are going to win elections, they need to let go of the trans issue. They need to focus less on that so they can get more of those middle swing voters. And to me, it's appalling, frankly. But I think within the queer community itself, it's frustrating because this isn't new. We just talked about the Christopher Street Liberation Day marches that
Right.
started in the early 70s in response to a raid on the Stonewall Inn that happened in 1969. So fast forward a year, it's 1970. People are coming together for this parade. The work to put this parade together was done by a group called STAR. And today they're known as the Street Transgender Activist Revolutionaries. And so it's drag queens, it's trans people, it's a group of people who in the 70s were known as street gays, who were leading the charge in getting marches like these together. Fast forward a couple of years, these folks who are taking the bigger risks in order to plan the parade, in order to do the lobbying and whatnot, are getting arrested and locked up and put in jail, while the, quote, more respectable looking gay men and lesbians are being able to be the front face of this work and reap the benefits of the work that landed their trans siblings in jail. And that work, like the benefits they were reaping, were only possible because of the risks that the quote less palatable people took. And so it's frustrating that we see the same tendency today, 50 years later, of people who want to acclimate into what is considered, I guess, straight, cis passing kind of culture that's buttoned up. Hey, we're just like you. We want the white picket fence as well. Yeah, we want the 2.5 kids and the dog. Like we're just like you. So we're going to distance ourselves from those people that you think are the freaks, right? It's frustrating because we've been here and we know that it didn't work.
Right.
Not only was it completely damaging to people, but it was systemically, it was an unsuccessful strategy. Like if you just want to talk brass tacks in terms of like what led to progress within the movement, but on a human to human level, like how can I say yes, rights for me, but not for you?
Right.
How can I say like I get to have these things, but no, you get the table scraps? Like
I think there's a story in the Bible about that as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There are many stories in the Bible about that, I think.
All right, Callie, we're going to talk about happier topics. And this is something a little bit fun that I've saved for the end.
Okay.
So this episode we have devoted completely to you. Normally Mitch and I do an intro where we talk about something fun or maybe what's going on in the world, but here's the fun thing that you are going to get to do. I think I know your answer.
Oh, she has been
Okay.
waiting to ask this
I'm
question.
so excited about it. Okay. So in the book and in person, you have told us a couple of times about the person who preached at or interested students day or something at the seminary you ended up going to, who said, and you'll have to
Mhm.
tell us her name, but who said the Bible is a word of God. It is not the word of God, or said in reverse,
Mhm.
and how much that meant to you and how much that really does change the conversation. So let's fast forward. What would you, if you were going to preach a sermon on a word of God that isn't necessarily from the biblical text, what would it be? If there is a text, what would you use? And what message would the sermon convey?
And I'll go ahead and name this professor because I name her in the book. It's
Yes.
Dr. Karen Massey at the McAfee School of Theology in Atlanta. And I am 100% serious when I say in the book that after that chapel service, like I stopped looking at my
Yeah.
other option for seminary. Like that's when I knew
Right.
that McAfee was for me. So shout out to Dr. Karen Massey and the folks at McAfee. Yeah, you probably know my answer. It would be the gospel according to Hadestown.
Yes.
Wow. I asked her, what if she doesn't mention that? Oh, she will mention it,
I
she
had
said.
no doubt this was coming up.
Listen,
and I'm
it
always
is.
here
It
for a
is. Oof.
conversation about Broadway. So let's do this.
Yes. Especially about Hadestown. Like, I am living my best life with the pro shoot and it being extended in movie theaters. And I know more about the show than is probably healthy. Like, I have strong opinions about lyric changes that happened between the concept album that was released in 2010 and the original cast album, not the original Broadway cast album, the original
Wow.
cast album that was released in 2017. And then the Broadway cast album that is the one that we know and the one that the pro shoot is based off of. But anyway, so I think for me, like the reason why that would be a text, and I feel like there is something just sacred at work in this story. Like there's something about timeless stories because for those who don't know, it's a retelling of the Greek tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice. So there's this sense of like the timeless nature of it and how we, no matter how far removed from the original writing of that story, we still experience grief and loss and love. Like all of those elements are still part of the human experience.
Mhm.
Um, but there are a couple of things about this show that I think have the potential to speak to the current moment. One of my favorite moments in the show is when Orpheus toasts to Persephone, and they're like everyone's celebrating Persephone's returned above ground, which means spring and summer are back.
Mhm.
It's weather's nice. We can be outside and celebrate and drink, and like it's just frivolity and fun. But he says this line to the world we dream about
Mhm.
and the one we live in now. And I can't think of a better definition of how prayer works.
Ooh.
Because when we pray for something, like we pray for peace, we recognize our present reality that we don't live in a world that has peace, but we can still imagine a world where peace is possible. And so it illustrates how prayer works because prayer done right invites us to hold on to the now and dream about the future at the same time. We're not future casting so much that we've neglected the present, but we're also not wallowing in despair at how awful things are now.
Mhm.
We still have that sanctified imagination
Mhm.
to think about those things that we pray for. Um, so that I could talk about Hadestown all day. Like that would be its own podcast episode. So I think I'll just leave it there. But to me, that's one of the most powerful elements, especially when it talks to us as people of faith and how we engage our lives. So
Yeah.
I love that. I knew that was going to be your answer, and I just want to say this. I want to, for at least for my portion, end where I began. You are one of our favorite people
Yes. Yes.
in a time and a place in my life where I'm having such a hard time hanging on to the church and to faith. You are a word from God, and I appreciate that.
Reverend, thank you so much for joining us. The book is titled Queer Gospel Jesus Life Through Rainbow Eyes. Make certain you pick it up at goodfaithmedia.org or wherever you purchase your reading materials. Callie, it's always a delight. Before we let you go, we've got one last question. You know what's coming. Missy's got to ask it, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
I have to collect myself first. I feel like that needed more clarification. But yes, like I said, you are a word, and you give me continued, I don't know, just encouragement and faith in our faith and what the church can collectively be within the community. So thank you. Sorry.
You can make me cry.
All right, Callie, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
I think my more to tell today is stay curious. I understand that for some folks, the title of my book is going to elicit a knee-jerk reaction,
Mhm.
likely because of some negative association they have with the word queer. But I want to challenge people, not just for the sake of reading my book, but just as like a posture for how they engage the world.
Mhm.
Like, don't act off of that knee-jerk impulse. Take a beat, breathe for a second, and respond with curiosity. I think we have a lot more to learn from each other and a lot more common ground to find if we walk through the world that way.
I will add, instead of clutching your pearls, clutch your margaritas and read on.
And read on. Well, Callie, again, congratulations on the book. Thanks for joining us this week. And you, like Missy said, are one of our very favorites.
Well, I mean, the feeling is mutual. Thank you all.
And to our audience, we want to thank you for joining us this week. Missy and I will be back next week. And until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.